Let me know when you're good on your side.
Here we go.
Good?
Yep.
All right, we are off and running. So, yeah, Grant, I appreciate you being open for a Linchpin member interview.
Yeah, happy to do it. Never thought this would happen. It was great to bump into you in cyberspace the other day for sure.
Yeah, so let people, there's a kind of a funny little story. How did we actually wind up connecting? You're saying before we started recording here?
Yeah, so I was in the market for a linchpin banner, so I went online and ordered one and a sticker. I put it up in my garage yesterday. Um, but for whatever reason, Google screwed up my address. We moved about 3 months ago. So I reached out 5 or 6 different ways to make sure that I got in touch with somebody, not thinking I was going to get in touch with you. And you actually returned my email message about the bad address. And then we started a conversation. So here we are.
Here we are. And here we are. Yeah, it's just trying to make it happen. And you wrote back a very nice email kind of detailing a little bit of your life, a little bit of your fitness journey and whatnot. And it just seemed really cool. It seemed like you had, you know, health and fitness, not just as a part of what you do, but you mentioned your wife and your daughter was kind of a family affair. And that always puts a smile on my face. And so, how big is your family right now, and who have you currently convinced to work out with you?
That's a good question. So small family. My wife and I have been married for 30, it'll be 38 years in December. Got married right.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Got married in '86, right after I was commissioned in the Marine Corps, and she's hung around with me for the last 38 years. We've got our oldest daughter is a James Madison University grad. She's an assistant principal down here in the Shenandoah Valley where we live in Harrisonburg.
Mm.
Uh, she and our son-in-law have our two grandkids. They're about 5 minutes from us over the hill. Um, one's 12 and one's 5, so they're not CrossFitters yet, but all in good time. Our youngest daughter is a University of Virginia grad, and she's back up in Wisconsin, which is where she was born about 27 years ago. Um, yeah, so two daughters, divided Virginia University family, and two granddaughters. So we're co-located with three of our four girls, so it's great.
That's pretty cool, man. I gotta tell you, something you just said brought me down memory lane like I haven't been brought down in a really long time. So I lived in Virginia Beach for about 11 years when I was in the military, and a buddy of mine, he and I back in the day, so this was probably, if I'm thinking, oh, this was, probably around the year 2000, let's say. So, 24 years ago. I had a Jeep, he had a Jeep, and we would regularly take our Jeeps to Harrisonburg, Virginia. And I don't know if more roads, I'm sure that every year that goes by, more roads are closed off. But back then, man, there was some great, just like public land, off-road trails, and we would go get into trouble, get lost in our Jeeps, just explore the back country and the mountains with camping gear, and we'd camp for 2 or 3 days in the woods and then winch and make our way out. And it was an absolute blast. I look back at that very fondly. So it's crazy that you're in the Harrisonburg area.
You can still do that over on the Alleghenies on the west side of the valley, which I've spent a little time trail running over there. Never in a Jeep, but yeah, you can still four wheel up there to your heart's content. So come on
Oh,
back. Yeah,
man, it was so a different time. Life was simpler.
yeah.
I had less responsibilities and no kids and all that stuff. And I could spend my money on things like, tires for my Jeep. But yeah, that was great. It's a beautiful part of the country.
It really is. We're lucky to be back here. We spent 13 years up in Loudoun County in Northern Virginia. And every time we came down here, either, visiting one of our daughters in school, we always fell in love with the Shenandoah Valley. Never thought we'd end up here. Uh,
Hmm.
but we're living in our 15th house in 38 years, and we're hoping this is our last. Obviously,
I,
that's
I
plenty.
Yeah, I would say that's plenty. Well, you said that the first thing that you did, you get yourself commissioned in the Marine Corps for a career there. What was your occupation in the Marine Corps?
So I was a peacetime Marine, commissioned in 86, got out in 1990, did one platoon leaders class hitch as an infantry officer, and then went right to the FBI Academy in March of 1990.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. I grew up wanting to be an FBI agent. I met a couple of my dad's buddies who were Vietnam vets, one of whom was a DEA agent, um, and his brother was an FBI agent. So from a very young age, the FBI was always on my mind. And then I got bit by the Marine Corps bug. Actually met a officer selection officer when I was a freshman at Ball State University who laid down the challenge that I couldn't deny. And I took the ASVAB a couple of weeks after meeting him and was fortunate enough to pass it, which I didn't think I would. And I was shocked when he called me and he said, "You got a high enough score to go to OCS." So um, yeah, that all happened at Ball State. I met my wife there, got my commission in the Marine Corps there, spent 3.5 years on active duty down in Camp Lejeune, did a couple of med deployments,
Mm,
got out right, just months before the first Gulf War, and went to the FBI Academy and 30 years in the FBI. So kind of you ask about the fitness part of it with my family. It's kind of interesting because obviously in the Marine Corps, it's sort of a fitness lifestyle as we knew it back in the 80s, which is obviously a little different than it is now. We just know a lot more about how to get in shape more efficiently,
hmm
I think. But always had a kind of fitness mindset. The Bureau was the same way. And then, I kind of grew up like a lot of us from my generation, go for some runs, lift some weights, do some push-ups and
Sure.
pull-ups.
Yeah.
And, life is good. Um, Now really CrossFit became a thing for me after Gene and I ran the Marine Corps Marathon together in 2006.
Oh, so you weren't afraid of some running.
No, I'd done a couple marathons, did a couple
What?
ultras along the
Let,
way.
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What was you always had this attraction to the FBI. What was the attraction? What drew you to it?
To the Bureau,
Yeah.
kind of the G-Man mystique. I think I grew up with a couple of the old FBI shows, and then, like I said, I met a couple of my dad's buddies and kind of listened to them tell war stories. It's kind of interesting because I never really was interested in being like a traditional police officer.
hmm
Um, the the Bureau just always appealed to me. I think it was kind of the G-Man kind of TV mystique. And then I read a couple of books growing up about, G-men chasing organized crime figures and bank
Sure.
robbers. Did enough research to, I guess, just enough to be dangerous. But I think meeting those guys when I was probably in sixth or seventh grade, and
Okay.
they grew up on the farm right around the corner from where I grew up, these old guys. And um, it kind of planted in my mind that these are a couple of my dad's friends from the farm. If these guys could go do something like that and see the world and, um, be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, and maybe I can do it too. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind. Joined the Marine Corps with the idea that that was going to be, I had a career mindset when I took my
hmm
in the Marine Corps. Um, and then, things just kind of lined up right. Timing worked out right. And I ended up applying for the Bureau and
So
really got
compare
fortunate.
and contrast for me the experience or the challenge, whatever, however you want to phrase it, of OCS versus the indoctrination and selection process as a new guy to become an FBI agent.
Um, Probably not all that comparable. I mean, I,
Because I don't know either process, so I'm kind of fascinated.
I mean, you generally know the OCS drill and what it,
Roughly, I didn't attend OCS, but I know again probably just enough to be dangerous, but you lived it.
yeah, I mean, officer candidate school, getting ready for that is like boot camp or um, it's screening and evaluation. So, minimal standards on back then it was 3 mile run, push-ups and or sit-ups and pull-ups. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of shooter's choice now on a couple of different things, but um, there were minimal standards you had to meet um, to get accepted into the OCS program. Frankly, I can't remember what they were.
But does,
Uh,
does OCS have like a Paris Island sort of a feel, or is it more of a gentleman's course, or what's it like?
it's actually so Marine Corps OCS is at Quantico, Virginia, um, down south of the airfield, Browns Field. Um, and it's very much, I didn't enlist in the Marine Corps first, so I don't have the boot camp
Mm-hmm.
experience. Um, but I did have a lot of prior enlisted guys in my OCS class, so they
Fair enough.
true gluttons for punishment. And I think what I would say, not again, just knowing from the Mustangs, that's what we called them, the prior enlisted guys, um, that the physical training standards at OCS were more difficult to maintain than at boot camp. The harassment package at boot camp was more difficult than OCS.
Okay.
Um, so here's the way I would describe it. And it comes down to back then, at least in the 80s in boot camp, they were trying to get you to quit or trying to
Mm,
get you through, get you out of the pipeline.
mm-hmm.
OCS was geared to make you quit.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think I started with 59 or 60 in my OCS class, and we finished with about half. Uh,
Okay.
because you can just tap out. You can just go our version of ring the bell, and you just go home. No
Gotcha.
questions asked. But so it was all competitive. Whereas generally speaking, boot camp, if you get through it, you're not really being screened and evaluated. Get from point A to point B. Maybe you got to go through something remedial here and there, but it was more designed, at least back then, to get you from point A to point B.
Okay.
OCS was designed to screen and evaluate everything you did, from PT to shooting to uh,
Right.
leading patrols, all that.
And what about on the FBI side of the house? What's that indoctrination process like?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the Bureau spends a lot of money getting you to the front door of the academy, through the testing process, the interviews, writing assignments, physical fitness tests, which are fairly significantly different than they were, 30, 19, when did I take the test? 1988, 1989, early 89, I
Right.
guess. So it's changed. Um, but they spend a lot of time and money getting you there through the testing process and all that. So once you get to the academy, they want to keep you. Uh,
Mm,
a lot has already been invested. So it's not, the FBI Academy is not like Marine Corps OCS. It's not really screening and evaluation. It's more education with some degree of a competitive environment,
okay.
which is all you can compete if you want, basically. I mean, if you want to be the top gun in your class, then you're going to approach it that way. If you don't care, you're just going to meet the standards and get out the door, you can do that too. Um, so I called it college with guns.
Okay. Okay.
I
Fair
always refer
enough.
to the FBI Academy as college with guns. It was just, and my perspective is different. If you were interviewing somebody that came to the FBI from a non-law enforcement or non-military environment, um, an attorney or an accountant or a
Sure.
high school
Sure.
teacher, that paramilitary environment can be shocking to
They
the
seem a lot more
uninitiated.
jarring.
Yeah, I mean, coming from the infantry and the Marine Corps, it was college with guns to me. It was
Right.
just stressful enough to keep it interesting and keep me highly motivated and keep me in a competitive mindset. But it was by no means like officer candidate school, where every day it was like, is this the day that, you know, I'm going?
Right. It maybe for most, the civilian population listening, I think they have a general understanding of what the United States military does. They probably have a general understanding of when they think of a police officer in their local town or municipality, what they do. How would you describe to them, like, what is the role of the FBI and how does that differ from when they think of their, their police force in their hometown?
I think yeah, that's a great question. I think the easiest way to think about that is the FBI as an investigative um, organization falling under the Department of Justice has investigative jurisdiction over somewhere in the low 300s of federal violations, from international terrorism to cyber crime to certain white collar crimes, some certain drug violations. And some of those we share with other federal agencies like the Drug Enforcement Administration, Secret Service, Treasury Department. Um, so when you think about an FBI agent, you think about the jurisdiction to investigate some of those 300 and some violations of US federal law.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to think about it.
And where did you focus? I mean, do you have one focus and it stays that way for your entire career, or every so often do you get to change disciplines? How did you spend your time?
I love this. This is turning into an FBI recruitment video, which is perfect because I was love it. It's kind of back in the old days, meaning actually before I started in 1990. Um, the old bureau was not particularly accommodating to the needs and wants of the workforce, especially the agents. You kind of went where they told you to go, when they told you to go there. You didn't have a lot of say in uh, transfer policy and that type of thing. By the time I came on, things had changed quite a bit. And there was a certain amount of control that you can maintain over your career, um, depending on what you decide to do in your career. But to your question about kind of investigative pathways, if you go to a large field office someplace and you really get into doing bank robbery investigations or drug investigations or counterterrorism investigations, if you're in a big field office someplace, especially someplace that's hard to staff, chances are
Mm,
if you want to stay there your whole career, you can probably do that. If you're in a smaller office or a medium office, it might be a little bit more difficult to kind of stay in a one pigeonhole.
hmm.
But agents today um, have a fair degree of control over the their general career path, what they become involved in from an investigative standpoint. And then if you if you go into leadership, formal leadership roles, like I chose to after about my 8th anniversary in the FBI, I went into um, formal leadership, went back to headquarters for my first tour and moved around from there. Even in that environment, I had a high degree of control over kind of
Okay.
my next career move. So
Guess
it
that's nice for the
seems,
quality of life of the agents.
yeah, it's very much. I didn't live it back in the day, but um, knowing people that did, it's a much more user friendly organization from the inside than it was in the 60s and 70s, for example.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I remember, from what you said about the needs of the agent versus the needs of the agency. When I think back of like the military, it was you can say what you want to say, but it's the needs of the Navy. You're going to go where thank you for giving us your 2 cents, but you're going to go where we tell you. If it lines up, wonderful. If it doesn't line up, whoop-de-doo. Uh, so out of curiosity, well, did you have a primary focus your career, whether it was investigation of this or bank robbery that, or did you bounce around to some things?
Yeah, funny thing happened that we all experienced 9/11. So my first 11 years in the FBI were focused on kind of the things you think about when you think of the FBI: chasing bank robbers, fugitives, gang members, that type of thing. I was really focused on the organized or the violent crime and drug program as a case agent, actually working my own cases in Southeast Wisconsin, um, which was my first office in Milwaukee. Um, and then went to headquarters and still in the violent crime program, kind of as a desk officer, and then out to Salt Lake City, Utah, as the supervisor of the violent crime task force. That was my first field supervisory job that I started in the spring of 2001. So 6 months before 9/11, my family and I moved to Salt Lake City. And then I was minding my own business, having the time of my life, supervising a super squad of some of the best agents in the FBI. Um, and then 9/11 happened. Um, and from that, basically from that moment through the rest of my career, I was involved in the counterterrorism program. So
Mm,
we were, if you recall, in 2002, we had the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. I was very much involved in that. Kind of learned counterterrorism in the intel community in the School of Hard Knocks in Salt Lake City, of all places, getting ready for the Olympics in 2002 in the post 9/11 environment. October 7th, 2001, we invade Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so getting ready for that global event in that global environment was a
mm,
life changing experience, and um, one that I probably wouldn't want to go through again, but it was the best way you can imagine to learn the interagency environment, the intelligence community, the counterterrorism world, which I had a vague idea of who Osama bin Laden was before 9/11. I mean,
mm-hmm.
I didn't pay attention to it. I was working, traditional violent crime stuff. Um, but after that, it was like a crash course that lasted um, for the next 19 years, really, working in the interagency environment with I'm sure some of your former colleagues along the way. Um, but yeah, so the first third of my career was kind of traditional. The second 2/3 was basically all CT.
Gotcha. Okay. And how or does that experience that occupation, that total immersion into that world, that subject matter and whatnot, does that jade your perspective of the world or civilization in some way, shape, or form right now? With just, you look at regular civilians walking around and you're like, man, things are so much worse than you realize you have no idea? Or do you see, hardworking groups of individuals and organizations behind the scenes that gives you hope? I mean, how does that color your vision?
I think it's funny. My wife and I talk about this all the time because she's a great American. She's a Marine Corps and FBI wife, so she's seen it all, and has been through much more than I have in many ways. But we talk about this all the time. Um, I think what the the experience, my professional experience, has, and I don't think I really appreciated it until I retired from the FBI. It'll be 5 years ago in February, this coming February. Um, I don't think I appreciated until I was gone from the government what I really learned during that period, and that is how complicated the world is and how there, um, it's, I'm sure black and white exist out there somewhere. I don't know where it is anymore. I
Mm,
thought I did for a long time. And now I realize that there's a lot more gray than there is black and white. Somehow you have to, in a lot of circumstances, um, with things that are happening in the world, you sometimes you have to talk yourself out of believing um, two things that are diametrically opposed to each other at the same time. It's
mm,
it's a complicated world, and
It's a lot more
alliances,
nuanced than people realize.
yeah, alliances are complicated. Um, the enemy, the face of the enemy is complicated. It changes all the time. Um, yeah, I think I appreciate that more, and I'm a, I'm a lot slower to leap to judgment about something that I see in the news, um, or something that happens here, in the local neighborhood. I think it's slowed down my thought process a lot, which I wish if I could go back 10 years, maybe I would change my mindset 10 years ago to kind of what it is now. But
Mhm.
I was um, I was under the tyranny of the urgent for really the last 15 years of my career. So I have a lot more time to think about these types of complicated concepts now, but I
Understood
guess
and,
that's the way I would put it.
agreed. Yeah, no, I agreed. I think depending upon your role, your organization, your unit, your priorities, your mission, you can be in an environment where everything seems like a level 10 emergency, even if it's not. And that can somehow, and most things aren't, truth be told. Most
Yeah.
things you can, most things, thank goodness, aren't. And you can pump the brakes a bit. We don't need to make this decision in the next 10 minutes. Let's figure this out a bit. But in the moment, it seems like, we got to go. The pedal's got to get smashed down to the floor and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not on that program anymore. I mean, with my current role with Secure Community Network, I mean, there's a lot of urgency. Obviously, the threat to the Jewish community in the United States and around the world is more acute than it has been in our lifetime. And I don't see it changing anytime soon, unfortunately. Um, but it's a different environment being on the nonprofit side of providing a security blanket to a community, not on the government side. Still
Mm-hmm.
have, in a lot of ways, I
Private
feel,
sector versus government sector.
yeah, I mean, even though myself and my ops team members that are scattered out all over the United States are deeply not embedded with, but connected to their law enforcement partners and the communities that we serve, to the point where a lot of our a lot of my security directors around the country feel like they didn't leave,
Sure. Right.
either the FBI or the law enforcement agency that they came from. But we're on the other side of it now. We're a facilitator. We're facilitators. We're information collectors and disseminators. We're consultants to the community. We're risk assessors, um, but we're not first responders.
Right.
So it's a
Right.
different, um, just a different um, it's a luxury in many ways. And I think if you talk to the men and women that work in my shop, they are thankful for the luxury of in most cases having the time to truly think through a problem completely.
Nice. Yes.
And where we came from, like the same place you came from, you never had that luxury.
No,
And
that's
most of the time now we have a little bit more time than we had in our previous roles to really think through problems. So
that's certainly wonderful. And again, we get to talk about fitness all the time. I talk about fitness, plenty, but it's always interesting to me hearing about people's lives, the non-fitness components, just your journey from the Marine Corps through the agency and all those different aspects. Like I find that quite fascinating. But maybe in closing, we should say, how did you find Linchpin? What brought you to Linchpin?
yeah, so I'll try to be brief. So my introduction to I started on this before. So Gene and I ran the Marine Corps Marathon together in 2006. Um, and I'd done Chicago Marathon in 91. I did a couple of 50-mile ultras.
Oh, wow.
I did the Bull Run 50 here in Fairfax County, Virginia, and I did the in 99, and I did the Squaw Peak 50 out in Provo, Utah in 2003. Um, but the Marine Corps was the last organized long run I've ever done. And when I got done with that thing, I was like I refer to myself as a 155-pound weakling because
Mm.
when I trained for these runs, I basically old school, I ran, period. Right? That's all I did. So I was weak, my shoulders were goofed up. I just felt bad. And about a year before that, a buddy of mine in the FBI who had been on the hostage rescue team and was going back to the hostage rescue team, um, he and I were in the same orbit in the bureau, and he introduced me to CrossFit. So this would have been 2005. So the website was what, 3, 4 years old then, maybe something like
Yeah,
that.
like 2001, I think it launched.
Yeah. So I'd never heard of it. And I said, what are you doing to get ready to go back to Quantico? And he said, I'm doing this thing called CrossFit. Check it out. And me, just like everybody else, I saw the workout of the day. And I think the first workout of the day I saw was just some kind of Olympic weightlifting, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the, um, so I started dabbling. I was going back and forth to Guantanamo Bay a lot at the time, so I started doing a lot of body weight, Cindy stuff, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
picking stuff off the website, cherry picking, trying stuff out, and doing it with a couple other guys. That happened for about a year, and then somewhere along the line, I was working in the counterterrorism division at Liberty Crossing One, um, and an old SEAL. Um, he's the CSO of Google now, but
Okay.
he was an FBI agent. He was on the hostage rescue team. So he drugged me down to the gym at LX1, and he was doing hardcore CrossFit. So I actually drank the Kool-Aid, and this
Okay.
was in 2007 into 2008, I think, and I never looked back. Had a garage gym. I actually started playing around in the Jim Jones website, Mark
Yep.
Mark Twight. Got a lot of education there. Started This all led me to Mark Ripito, Dan John, you, uh, my other CrossFit hero, Spieler. That's the time frame where I started following all you guys.
Okay.
Reading the CrossFit Journal, your articles. That's when it all, like the 2007, 8, 9. And then along the way, Jean didn't I didn't get her drug into this until like 2014. So the first CrossFit gym, I was doing this in the garage. I've been a garage gym rat really since it started. 2014, Jean joined a gym in Purcellville, Virginia. I finally convinced her to join it, and she kind of never looked back. Um, then we moved back to Indiana. I still have my garage gym, and I would go to the box with her when I could, like on the weekends. So I was still working out in the garage. She was going to the box. We get back to Indiana. We joined another box in Broad Ripple, which was phenomenal. Um, did that. It didn't work out at home at all. Worked out at the box for 2 years. Um, moved back to Virginia a little over 18 months ago. Joined a gym here in Harrisonburg while we were getting settled.
Mm.
Uh, and that was a great experience too. Um, here in Harrisonburg. And then when we finally got settled, um, the garage gym opened again. But so the linchpin thing. So this is, as I mentioned to you in my email, the box experience in many ways was phenomenal. And in some ways, because I'm kind of a CrossFit purist. I think I believe in CrossFit the way Greg Glassman meant it to be,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I believe is driving your programming, the thoughtful approach to it, respecting the heavy days, all that stuff is the way I believe it was meant to be in its simplest, most beautiful, pure form. And I didn't think that existed anywhere because in the three boxes we were members of, it wasn't there. It
Mm.
was great experiences, but you had to have a governor on yourself, right? You had, and I went to level 1 in 2019, so I kind of learned um, the basics, the philosophy, I went to level one in Indianapolis. So I kind of, drank that Kool-Aid too, which I think made me even more of a purist. Um, but after level one, I realized that what I was looking for in CrossFit, which was the genuine, unadulterated
Right.
nugget, was becoming harder and harder to find in a gym. Not that there's
Mm,
not huge benefits to the gym, but I've never considered the gym environment to be for everybody. And frankly, it's not for my wife.
mm-hmm.
It, she's extremely competitive. She will go until something flies off. And as you know, that's not, the gym, the box environment can be detrimental to that mindset. She's a type A. I'm kind of a type B plus. Um, so I'm a lot easier to keep tamped down. Uh,
Sure.
so I just went looking. This is my second time being a member. So I did it for about a year in Indiana. Um, and then when we moved back here and joined the gym, I joined with Gene. So I
Mm-hmm.
dropped Linchpin for about 9 months. And then when we moved into our house and I got settled, then I jumped back in. Um, but that's the reason I found. I mean, I knew who you were, obviously. I didn't know you had Linchpin for all these years, but I just started looking online for CrossFit programming that I thought
Gotcha.
what I was looking for, and that's how I found you. That's how I found Linchpin. And I don't I know that you do programming for gyms. Um, I I wish I'd have been in one. Frankly, I don't. I'm glad to know. I don't know how many of them use your programming, but I'm glad to know that the business model can survive using your programming. Um,
Yeah, you got to educate, it takes some education of members, I think, just because depending upon when you did get indoctrinated into CrossFit, if you get indoctrinated into CrossFit recently, you think strength plus metcon is CrossFit. Like that's normal CrossFit if you came on board in the last however many years. And if you see that not happening, you're like, huh, well, that's strange. When, truth be told, it's not strange that it's actually the original recipe. So it just depends, it's been around for quite some time. And so again, it just depends upon your environment and your audience.
but I think I was thrilled not only to find the programming, but also to know that you were behind it because, like I said, I've read your stuff. I've watched all the videos you've ever made. Just the way you approach the gig has always been impressive to me. Um, because I think it's the right, thoughtful kind of, okay, let's let the air out of this approach and what are we actually trying to do here? And it's especially meaningful to my wife and I in our early 60s who are now in this game for longevity.
Mm,
Uh, I did the open 5 or 6 times. I got hurt every time. I'll be first to admit it. I got hurt every single time I did the open. Um, Competitively,
hmm.
registered and the whole deal. I'm not saying I won't do the open again at some point, but that's not my focus anymore. My focus is, longevity and health span and, being strong as an ox when I'm 85 years old. Uh,
100%.
and Jeans is the same. And that's why, and our daughter, who's 36, um, it's funny, come full circle. When we lived in Gitmo, she was in 10th and 11th grade, and she'd go to the gym with me on Marine Hill every day when we lived in Gitmo and worked out with me. And now we've come full circle. She's a high school assistant principal. She lives 5 minutes from us. She's getting after it with us doing CrossFit Linchpin programming. And the thing that is so cool about it for older people and for for people like my daughter who are not um, comfortable with a gym environment and kind of the typical, you know, gym
Hmm.
approach. You give the options, the warm up, scaled version. I mean, scaling is cool. That's the greatest mantra in the history of CrossFit, as far as I'm concerned. And
Right.
it's meaningful to 60-year-olds, and it's meaningful to my 36-year-old daughter who's a little skittish about this, right? So
Mm,
giving us the options that are workable for older people. Um, but if you want to, like you said, if you want to burn it down, you've always got that option too. Um, so
you
I
really
just,
do.
it's that you are preaching the genuine article without a doubt, and I think that's the best. Um, it's the best long-term approach, I think.
I I appreciate it, man. I mean, I'm very proud of our community. We've got people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, from beginner, intermediate to advanced to a 50-pound deadlift to a 600-pound deadlift and everything in between, all kind of just marching forward together, making smart decisions. And yeah, it's pretty darn cool. And it's people like you, people like your wife, people like your daughter that, make the community as awesome as it is. So, thank you for the kind words, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Please tell your wife thanks, tell your daughter thanks for being a part of the community. I don't take it lightly, and it means a lot.
Well, we will keep getting after it, and I know you will too. Really, truly, Pat, appreciate what you're doing for the community, and I spread the word as often to as many people as I can. Um, but just keep doing it. You're doing the Navy and the CrossFit community very proud, and I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
I'm doing my best. Well, Grant, I will see you online, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Pat. Appreciate it. Good to get to know you.